Reproducibility is critical to our view of disciple making in Crossworld. If our approach is not reproducible by all of our people, that is our Crossworld staff, and the people that they disciple and their disciples, if it's not reproducible, we don't want to do it, because disciple making, reproductive disciple making won't happen if it's too complicated. So we're very concerned as we develop this in our culture that whatever we do, it be reproducible. And we've articulated disciple making in our particular context as helping people everywhere to live and love like Jesus. And then the process part of it is by imparting God's truth through authentic relationship wherever life happens. There's really three critical ingredients as we view disciple making, and that is imparting God's truth through authentic relationship wherever life happens. It's truth, relationship, and life. God's truth is the absolute necessary content for making a disciple. Relationship is the absolutely necessary context for making a disciple. And life is the classroom. And if you have the content but you don't have the context, if you have the truth but you don't have a relationship, truth just doesn't pass very well when you don't have a relationship. If you have the relationship but you don't have the truth, you make lots of friends, but you're not making followers of Jesus. So for us, it's disciple making is helping people everywhere to live and love like Jesus by imparting God's truth through authentic relationship wherever life happens. It's truth, relationship, and life. Truth, relationship, and life have to be part of what we do. And so we're heavy on applying truth, not just learning truth, but applying truth through relationships that we're developing and doing that in the context of life, not just in the context of your church basement on Tuesday evenings from 7 till 8:30, but in the context of life as we do life together. And so we encourage our people to ask God for disciples on both sides of the cross, because we believe disciple making is not just something that starts at conversion. John 6:66 talks about disciples who turned away and didn't follow Jesus any longer. I believe they were not believers. They weren't saved who lost their salvation. They were initial followers who said, don't want to follow anymore. So we ask God for disciples on both sides of the cross, that God would give us someone in whom we can invest our lives in his truth to bring them to faith in Jesus, and someone on this side of the cross in whom we can invest our lives in his truth to bring them to fullness in Jesus. And so truth, relationship, and life are the critical ingredients, whether you're talking about disciples over here or disciples over here. And so we're very heavy on living and loving like Jesus and bringing his truth to bear in those relationships. Especially with disciples on this side of the cross, we're very heavy in living life, in trying to incarnate Jesus and his truth through relationship. So, for example, going out for dinner with neighbors, or trying to get them to come over for dinner, having them over for coffee or ice cream, shoveling their snow when they're away, or cutting their grass when they're away. And you know what? My neighbor blew out my driveway last week. Both of those snowstorms, I was away. Without me, I've never asked him to do that. He came over and he blew out my driveway. And I believe it's because there's a relationship developing between us. So it's very heavy on relationship. We invite them into our lives, and we hope that they will reciprocate and invite us back into their lives, because we believe that truth finds fertile ground where there is relationship. On one occasion recently with a disciple on this side of the cross, we wanted to go to a certain event together with this couple that was only happening on the night that our kids were arriving home for Christmas. And that we had already decided that we were going to have this really nice family time with our family. But it was the only night that we could take part in this event with our neighbors if we wanted to do that. And I say that to say that we have found disciple making and relationship, the relationship part is not easy. In fact, it's very difficult. And we had a real struggle in that particular instance. We said, okay, do we try to figure out a way to have somebody else pick up our kids at the airport so that we can go to this event, and then they're already going to be at our kids are going to be home by the time we get done, and then we just say, good night, friends, we're going to our families. What do we do? And so we decided, well, we say that disciple making is imparting God's truth through authentic relationship wherever life happens. What more authentic relationship and life could there be than inviting them into your family time that evening? And so we did, because we really believe that God's truth finds fertile soil when we develop relationships in life. With our disciples on this side of the cross, the process looks similar, although often it's much more intentional when it comes to God's truth, because the folks over here haven't necessarily said, we're going to study the Bible with you. We hope that they will at some point, but the folks over here have committed to engage in a relationship in the pursuit of three things: God and His truth, personal holiness, and people. People on this side of the cross and people on this side of the cross. And so as part of pursuing God and His truth, we spend a lot of time in the Word of God. We have chosen, I'm not saying Crossworld has, I think for each one, the process of imparting truth looks different, but the Losh family, have chosen for most of our discipling relationships not to use a curriculum, not because we're against curriculum. There's some great curriculum out there. There's one I just read recently by Francis Chan called Multiply, lots of good stuff, but we have chosen not to use a curriculum because out of a conviction that we want what we're doing to be as reproducible as possible. So with the men and the women that my wife and I meet with, we say this is the curriculum. And so we generally will commit to reading 20 to 30 chapters a week, and when we get together, we talk about what God's teaching us. And generally we'll get together once a week for a meal, for an evening. And so, for example, yesterday my wife and I got back from 2 weeks away on travels, and Thursday night is usually the time that we get together for our meal with three couples, and we didn't really feel like it, but we wanted to because of the relationship. So we got together with them, and it just so happens that this past week, the guys were reading Leviticus 1 through 13. So we took the first half of Leviticus, and since that wasn't 20 chapters, we said, and we'll read a chapter of Proverbs every day too. We get together and we just pursue God and His truth, personal holiness, and people. And so much like Glenn was saying, how's your in, how's your out, how's your up? A similar kind of thing. And some evenings we spend a lot more time on the God's truth part, and some evenings we spend a lot more time on your personal holiness part, but we pursue life together. And, we have some amazing discussions. You say, what kind of a discussion can you have out of Leviticus 1 through 13? It's hard. But let me tell you what one guy said to me last night. He said, he made a joke about the sacrifices, and it's about sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice. Oh, and Nadab and Abihu get zapped and then sacrifice and sacrifice. But he said, I said, so what do you think God's been saying to you this week? And he said this. He said, in relation to Nadab and Abihu, after they were killed, Moses said to Aaron, you can't tear your clothes, you can't mourn, don't leave the tent, because if you do, you'll be dead. And Tim said to me, he said, God's challenged me that as a leader, I don't have the luxury of being governed by how I feel at any given moment. I thought that's pretty powerful. I don't have the luxury of being governed by how I feel right now. And so reading God's scripture just opens doors to talk about how that looks in my life in this particular context. Truth. Just let me mention quickly. Truth, relationship, and life. We sometimes also get together outside of our house at a Starbucks or a Yogurtini. We were at Yogurtini over in Independence. I think it was Independence, not Blue Springs, but over in Independence a few months ago with one of the couples. And we started talking about what we'd been reading, what we'd been learning, what's God saying to you, what do you think you need to do about it? And after about 30 or 40 minutes, just of sitting there at the table with our Bibles open talking, one of the guys who works at Yogurtini walks up and he says, "Can I ask you a question?" We said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you think God cares about the breakup of my relationship with my girlfriend?" And it opened an incredible opportunity to talk for about 15 minutes with this guy. I was going, "You're working, can you?" And he just kept on talking. An incredible opportunity to talk about the gospel with this young guy who had come back from a deployment to Afghanistan and who was brokenhearted because his girlfriend had left him. When you get God's truth and relationship out where life happens, amazing opportunities arise. So God's truth, relationship. As I said, I got back last night from a couple weeks away. Tonight, I get to go to the wedding of the daughter of one of the guys that God's allowed me to be investing in. And he said, "Dale, would you mind staying around afterwards tonight to help us clean it all up?" I'm not a late night person. I just kind of zone out about 8 p.m. every night. The most strenuous thing I can do intellectually is to read, the Reader's Digest or something after 8 o'clock. But I wouldn't miss the opportunity of being able to connect with one of the guys that I'm building a relationship with, to miss the opportunity to do that in the context of life. Because I believe that relationship in life is fertile ground for God's truth to take root. Just one last quick story. When you are in truth-focused relationship, life happens by itself, and life offers us many powerful opportunities to take God's truth and apply it in a certain situation, like it did one evening last year when one of the guys in what we call an LTG, a Life Transformation Group, broke down in tears, and he shared this gut-wrenching personal crisis in his life. And without missing a beat, the other 3 guys in the group almost spontaneously fell on their knees around this brother, put their hands on him, and sobbed, literally were sobbing out to God in prayer for what this guy was going through. You cannot orchestrate that. You cannot program that. That is something that I believe happens when you mix those 3 ingredients: truth, relationship, and life. And so that's a little snapshot of how we're trying to pursue it in Crossroad. I wish I were further down the road in this. God really began working on me about 3 years ago about how little I intentionally invest in a concentrated way in a few people. I invest in everybody. I go and I preach at your church this weekend, and I'll see you in 2 years. And, I kind of all over the map. And so I've really only been intentionally doing it for about 3 years, investing in a few people. But I've been surprised quickly early on with how the guys that I'm investing in are out doing stuff that I don't even know about. A few weeks ago with a couple of them that we were together talking, and we hadn't talked about the out part for a while, the pursuit of people in the world. And so I said, "How's that going, guys?" And Mike says, "Well, it's going pretty good tomorrow morning," which is his day off Friday. He says, "Tomorrow morning at 7:30, I'm meeting with a guy who's a follower of Christ, and his marriage is broken up, and I meet with him every week. I've been meeting with him every week." And he said, "And then at noon, I'm meeting with a nephew of mine who's an unbeliever, and we're getting together because I've been wanting to talk to him about Christ, and he's got a lot of questions." And I'm going, "Oh, okay, good." And the same with all the guys that I'm meeting with right now are involved in the out part. They're not just saying, "Let's read 20 chapters and talk about how much we're learning." But I actually am more challenged by them with the out, I think, than they are by me, because I'm so much the in. I spend my life with people like you that I really have to work hard to get out there.